It all began on a Saturday morning. I was sipping my coffee, enjoying the rare peace and quiet of a weekend, when I heard the unmistakable whirr-click of a garage door opening. Except it wasn't my clicker. Peeved, I stepped to the window and almost dropped my mug. There, in the middle of my garage, was Karen's candy apple red SUV. Karen, for context, is the HOA's self-proclaimed enforcer of neighborhood harmony. Her version of harmony involves citing every blade of grass and side-eyeing anyone who breathes near her hydrangeas. She had the gall to climb out of her vehicle with a tote bag in hand, calmly striding away as if she'd parked in some valet lot and not the private property of a livid neighbor. Slapping on some sandals, I stormed out after her, catching her just as she was about to saunter into her house across the street. "Karen!" I barked, hands on my hips. She paused, blinking at me like a clueless cat. "Oh, good morning. Lovely day, isn't it?" I was too stunned to even respond properly. "Are you aware you parked inside my garage?" "Oh, that," she waved dismissively. "I figured you wouldn't mind since your spot was empty this morning. My driveway's being washed." She said this as if it were the most reasonable thing in the world. "Mind? Karen, you broke into my garage." "Broke in?" she scoffed. "I know the code. I saw you punch it in last week. It's not like I damaged anything." At that moment, I did what any reasonable adult would do. I smiled with all the passive-aggressive energy I could muster and said, "Don't worry, I'll handle it." Karen sashayed away, utterly oblivious to the consequences looming over her head. Here's the thing about my garage. It's not just a place for parking. It's basically a fortress. The electric door had a locking mode that could trap anything inside like Fort Knox. When I'd had it installed, I joked with the installer about it being overkill. Well, today it wasn't. I pulled up the app on my phone, enabled the lock, and walked back to my house feeling smug. Karen wouldn't be getting her car back until she learned a thing or two about boundaries. It didn't take long for the chaos to unfold. Around mid-afternoon, I heard the telltale click of stilettos on my driveway. Peeking through the curtains, I saw Karen standing in front of my garage, remote in hand, repeatedly pressing the button like a toddler, trying to turn on a disconnected TV. When the door didn't budge, she stepped back and yelled, "Hello? Are you in there? I need my car." I stepped outside, trying to suppress a grin. "Oh, Karen, is there a problem?" "The door's not opening," she snapped, her voice dripping with indignation. "Well, that's strange," I said, giving the app on my phone a subtle tap to lock it even harder. "Maybe it's on a break." She glared at me. "You locked it, didn't you?" "Of course I did." I folded my arms. Why wouldn't I secure my own garage? "You can't do that. My car is in there." "Your car is in there without permission," I shot back. "Didn't the HOA bylaws mention anything about trespassing?" Karen's face burned red. "This is completely unacceptable. I'll report you at the next meeting." "I'd love that. Maybe we can discuss adding something in the bylaws about criminally breaking into someone's house." Word spread faster than wildfire. By late afternoon, half the neighborhood had assembled in my front yard, murmuring, whispering, and eagerly watching the showdown like it was front row seating for the latest soap opera. Kevin showed up with his lawn chair and a bucket of popcorn, because of course he did. "Did I miss anything?" he asked, chomping away. "Karen's car is still imprisoned," I said. Classic. Karen, meanwhile, was pacing up and down my driveway, phone in hand. "You'll hear from my lawyer," she shrieked for the 7th time, as if repeating it would materialize one from thin air. Tim, my brother, chose that moment to stroll over. "Oh, fantastic. I was wondering what all the commotion was about." "Karen's SUV is parked in my garage," I explained. Tim whistled low. Didn't know neighborly courtesy extended to breaking and entering. Karen glared at him, but wisely chose to keep her mouth shut. By evening, Karen had called the HOA president, Brady, to mediate. Poor Brady looked like a deer in the headlights, clutching his clipboard as he tried to reason with both parties. "Look," Brady said, adjusting his glasses. "How about we just unlock the garage and sort this out amicably?" "I'll unlock it," I said, once Karen apologizes, admits this was wrong, and promises never to pull something like this again. Karen gasped in outrage. "I will not apologize for a misunderstanding." Tim leaned against the doorframe, thoroughly enjoying himself. "Karen, this misunderstanding will cost you a tow truck if you don't play nice." Brady, caught between a rock and a fiery Karen, eventually gave up, mumbling something about needing to check the bylaws for clarity. By the time Karen finally cracked, it was well past sunset. The neighborhood was enjoying the show under lawn chairs and fairy lights, and Kevin had started selling lemonade, capitalizing on the audience. "Fine," Karen huffed. "I'm sorry. Are you happy now?" "Not quite," I said. "Try again, and this time mention the part where you won't break into someone's garage again." Through what must have been physical pain, Karen mumbled an apology that was so insincere it could have wilted a cactus. Still, I unlocked the garage and watched as she hopped into her SUV and sped off down the street, nearly plowing over Kevin's flamingo scooter in her rage. Over the next few days, Karen avoided me like the plague. The HOA held an emergency meeting to officially ban anyone from parking on private property without permission, a rule that everyone knew only existed because of Karen. The best part? Rumor had it that Karen's own driveway washing ran long, and she had to park gasp on the street for a week. And me? I made absolutely sure to change my garage code to something no one could see. When Tim asked me if the whole incident was worth the headache, I just grinned. Every second. After the whole garage debacle, Karen's reign as the neighborhood's self-declared queen of order wasn't just shaken, it imploded. Whispers of her garage invasion became the favorite topic of discussion during evening dog walks, morning jogs, and impromptu gossip sessions by Kevin's flamingo-adorned mailbox. Karen, however, was not one to accept defeat. While most people might have laid low in shame, Karen came up with what she called her Great Redemption Plan. Unfortunately for the neighborhood, her plan involved orchestrating a week-long HOA beautification initiative. Her vision? A utopia where every lawn was precisely 2 inches tall, every mailbox sparkled, and not a single garden flamingo dared to roost. She passed out flyers, printed in gilded font, of course, and announced her plan with a megaphone during the neighborhood potluck. "This is an opportunity," she declared, her voice echoing across the cul-de-sac, "to restore the dignity of Willow Creek. Together we can rise above the nonsense and set a shining example for other neighborhoods." I exchanged a look with Tim, who whispered, "Rising above nonsense," ironic coming from the woman who parked in someone else's garage. Kevin, sipping lemonade from a cup featuring his newest Flamingo Squad logo, raised his hand. "Are flamingos considered beautification or nonsense?" Karen's lip twitched. "They are quirky," she managed through gritted teeth, "but not entirely aligned with the aesthetic standards we're striving for." Needless to say, Kevin was not on board. The beautification initiative was chaos from the start. Karen, clipboard in hand, marched up and down the sidewalks, barking orders at neighbors while timing their compliance on her smartwatch. Mrs. Hargrove was publicly shamed for her underwhelming begonias. The Johnsons, who dared to plant sunflowers in their backyard, were chastised for their excessive height and issued an official HOA reprimand. Karen even tried to recruit Tim for her beautification effort. "With your skills," she said sweetly, "you could draft new regulations to ensure compliance from everyone." Tim leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. "Karen, I don't draft petty regulations. I dismantle them." When that failed, she turned her attention to me. "Surely you want to recover from the incident. Participating could go a long way in restoring goodwill between us." "Karen," I replied, smiling like the neighborhood-wide chaos didn't amuse me to no end. "I've never been much of a joiner, but good luck with that." Karen's initiative hit its tipping point when she finally circled back to Kevin's lawn zoo. His army of flamingos had grown to include a seasonal, inflatable flamingo holding a pumpkin spice latte. It was the pride of the block. "Kevin," Karen said sternly, holding her clipboard so tightly her knuckles turned white, "you have 24 hours to remove every flamingo from your property. It's simply not in the spirit of this initiative." Kevin, theatrically offended, put a hand on his chest. "Karen, these flamingos are our spirit." That evening, neighbors quietly rallied around Kevin. Mrs. Lopez contributed a string of flamingo-shaped Christmas lights. Brady accidentally approved a budget to install a giant neon flamingo by the HOA entrance. Even Tim got involved, drafting a legal argument that deemed flamingos to be culturally significant under a rarely used HOA clause from 1998. By sundown, Karen's initiative had transformed into the Willow Creek Flamingo Festival. The night of the Flamingo Festival, Karen made one last dramatic attempt to regain control. Dressed in a pristine white blazer, she stormed into the festival with a Bluetooth speaker blaring Beethoven and a stack of flyers arguing for aesthetic uniformity. "I demand an emergency HOA meeting," she shouted, waving the flyers like some kind of suburban battle flag. But before anyone could respond, Kevin rolled up on his now iconic flamingo scooter, decked out with LED lights and wearing a flamingo-themed helmet. "Karen," he said calmly, "would you like a ride? We're about to start the dinner parade." The crowd burst into laughter. Even Brady smothered a chuckle behind his clipboard. Karen, realizing she'd lost the battle, and perhaps her audience, stormed off muttering something about the lack of respect for HOA principles. After that night, Karen took a conspicuous step back from her HOA involvement. She still attended meetings, but her clipboard became more of a prop than a weapon. Some said she'd turned over a new leaf. Others figured she was just plotting her next move. Meanwhile, the rest of the neighborhood leaned into the quirks that made Willow Creek special. The Flamingo Festival became an annual event, with prizes for most creative flamingo display and best scooter decor. Tim, of course, continued to be the neighborhood's legal genius, ensuring new bylaws remained realistic and flamingo-friendly. Kevin, buoyed by his newfound fame, started a small business selling custom flamingo mailboxes. He even made one for me, featuring a flamingo locking a miniature red SUV inside a tiny garage. And me. I kept myself amused with every twist and turn this wacky community had to offer. After all, Willow Creek wasn't perfect, but it wasn't boring either. Just when life in Willow Creek seemed to have settled into its usual quirky chaos, Karen made her move. She reappeared at the next HOA meeting with a binder so thick it could double as a weapon. "I propose," she announced, slamming the binder onto the table, "a vote to re-establish stronger standards for our HOA, and the first order of business, a Neighborhood Harmony Committee." Brady, still recovering from the Flamingo Festival fallout, blinked up at her like he was processing a foreign language. "A committee for what exactly?" "To enforce rules, of course," Karen sniffed. "This committee will be responsible for ensuring everything from lawn decor to holiday lighting meets our neighborhood's aesthetic standards. We simply can't devolve into chaos." She glanced pointedly in my direction. The room grew tense. Kevin leaned across the back of his chair, munching on a granola bar, and whispered to me, "Does she mean us, or just the flamingos?" "I'm guessing both," I whispered back. Tim adjusted his tie and cleared his throat. "Karen, correct me if I'm wrong, but aren't HOAs already designed to manage rules for the neighborhood? Wouldn't this Harmony Committee be redundant?" Karen smiled in the smug way that made you long for an emergency stash of popcorn. "Oh, I'm aware, but this committee's specific focus will be on upholding standards where certain individuals continue to push boundaries." Translation: Karen wanted an excuse to target me, Kevin, and anyone else who didn't bow to her aesthetic dictatorship. Not to be outdone, Kevin decided to form the Flamingo. "We're voting on this?" I asked. "Of course," Karen replied sweetly, "because this is a democracy." With the vote set for 2 weeks out, the neighborhood erupted into unexpected election-level chaos. Karen, naturally, campaigned with the zeal of someone running for national office. She went door to door handing out cookies shaped like hydrangeas and leaving flyers filled with thinly veiled attacks on our neighborhood's decline. Freedom Front, or FFF, as he insisted we call it. His campaign materials included flamingo-shaped balloons and yard signs that read, "Vote no on Karen's committee, vote yes on fun." "What's our slogan?" Kevin asked one evening during an impromptu planning session at my house. He had spread an assortment of glittery signs across the table, most featuring slogans like "Lawn Goals, not Lawn Patrols," and "Don't be a Karen about it." Tim, who had joined us for purely legal reasons, or so he claimed, leaned back in his chair. "How about, because the only committee we need is a barbecue one?" "Oh, I like that," Kevin said, scribbling it onto a flamingo-shaped clipboard. Karen, of course, had no sense of humor. When she found out about our counter-campaign, she retaliated with an article in the HOA newsletter titled, "The Threat of Irresponsible Lawn Decor." It claimed that unregulated flamingo displays could lead to diminished property values, increased crow populations, and general hooliganism. "Hooliganism?" Kevin said, outraged. "I'm offended. That flamingo display was art." By the night of the vote, the neighborhood atmosphere was electric. The meeting room was packed, with chairs pulled from the nearby community center to accommodate the crowd. Karen stood at the front, wearing a pastel power suit and holding yet another binder of spreadsheets and bylaws. "My fellow neighbors," she began with a dramatic sigh, "we stand at a crossroads. We can either rise as a community dedicated to excellence or descend into flamingos and chaos. The choice is yours." She ended her speech with a brief PowerPoint presentation, which included unflattering pictures of Kevin's flamingo float and my slightly overgrown hedges. "Wow, she's really leaning into the drama," I whispered to Tim. "She's trying to guilt people into voting with her," Tim responded, smoothing his tie. "It's actually a decent tactic for someone who hasn't argued 12 cases in front of a judge." Then it was Kevin's turn to shine. He rolled up to the podium because, of course, he was riding the scooter Ethan had helped him trick out with flamingo-shaped headlights, and adjusted the microphone. "Good evening, fellow neighbors," Kevin began, mimicking Karen's formal tone. "But unlike Karen, I come to you not with binders, but with an olive branch, or, more accurately, a flamingo branch." He gestured toward the back of the room, where dozens of pink flamingo balloons swayed in solidarity. The crowd chuckled, and even Brady couldn't hide a smirk. "I'm here to remind us of what makes Willow Creek special," Kevin continued. "Our quirks, our camaraderie, and yes, our flamingos. A vote for Karen's committee is a vote against individuality. Do we really want someone citing us every time a kid chalks a dinosaur on the sidewalk, or someone hangs lights in July? I say, freedom for flamingos." The room erupted into cheers. After much deliberation, and more flamingo puns than anyone could anticipate, the votes were cast. Brady tallied the results while the crowd waited with bated breath. Karen stood stiffly by the refreshment table, glaring at anyone who dared grab more than one hydrangea cookie, while Kevin passed out celebratory mini flamingo keychains, just in case. Finally, Brady cleared his throat. "The results are 58 votes against the Harmony Committee, 14 votes for." The room erupted into applause, and Kevin raced his flamingo scooter in a victory lap around the meeting room. Karen, meanwhile, packed up her binder and stormed out with a grim, "This isn't over." With the committee vote behind us, life in Willow Creek returned to its usual quirky, slightly unhinged normal. Kevin declared the first Flamingo Freedom Day, complete with a parade and flamingo-themed baked goods. People swapped their HOA complaints for friendly debates over which flamingo display was the best. Karen kept a low profile for a while, sporadically grumbling at meetings but seemingly resigned to the community's, shall we say, vibrant personality. And me, I still lock my garage regularly, just in case Karen gets another bright idea about parking her car inside. But if she tries, I'll be ready, with a lock,